The trailer was partially hidden beneath a tangle of overgrown weeds and towering grass, giving the impression that it had been untouched for years. Stepping inside, investigators were met with an unsettling silence. Metal lockers lined both sides of the narrow space, but something was off. While nearly all the lockers were tightly shut, their doors locked or rusted closed, one locker stood slightly ajar. The investigators' focus shifted immediately. With a collective breath held, they began opening lockers one by one, searching for clues, or perhaps bracing for something worse. Eventually, they found Lisa. But tragically, by the time they discovered her, it was already too late. Dear viewers, we appreciate your support and comments. It means a lot to us. Thank you for being with us. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1997, in a small and tranquil Swedish town nestled among gentle hills and peaceful forests. The kind of place where everyone knew one another, and little ever disturbed the routine pace of daily life. Lisa grew up in this serene setting, surrounded by the love and support of her close-knit family. She lived with her parents and her older sister, and from a young age, she stood out as someone full of energy, optimism, and a deep sense of determination. Even as a child, Lisa had dreams that reached far beyond the borders of her hometown. She was deeply interested in the world around her, its architecture, its history, and its cultures. Long before she graduated high school, Lisa had already made up her mind that she wanted to study architecture. Her heart was set on Australia, a land she had only seen in photographs and documentaries, but one she dreamed of calling home during her university years. It wasn't just a passing fantasy. Lisa was serious. She made plans, set goals, and followed through with quiet conviction. Lisa also had a deep appreciation for travel, a love she shared with her parents. As a family, they had visited numerous countries, exploring new places together. These journeys opened Lisa's eyes to the diversity and beauty of the world and fueled her passion for design and structure. Over time, she developed a spirit of independence. In the summer of 2015, at the age of 18, Lisa got what could be considered her first real job. She was hired at a cozy café located about a 40-minute drive from her home. It was a significant step for her, and she took it very seriously. During the initial weeks of her new role, her parents drove her to and from work to ensure her safety and comfort, especially since the job required traveling through rural roads. Recognizing Lisa's commitment and wanting to support her growing independence, her father soon bought her a scooter. Although it was exciting for Lisa, her father remained cautious. For the first several weeks, he drove behind her in his car every weekend morning and evening while she commuted to work. She was still getting used to operating the scooter and navigating traffic on her own. Lisa's work schedule was limited to weekends, which allowed her to balance her job with other responsibilities and social life. It wasn't until Sunday, June 7th, that her father finally allowed her to ride to work alone. That morning felt like a milestone for both of them. Lisa had proven herself responsible, and her father trusted her to make the journey by herself for the very first time. Later that day, around midday, her parents decided to pay her a surprise visit at the cafe. They thought it would be nice to have lunch together and see how she was adjusting to her new role. When they arrived, they found the place buzzing with activity. It was a particularly busy day, and Lisa was working hard, serving customers, clearing tables, and taking orders. Despite the rush, she managed to take a brief break and joined her parents for a quick snack and a warm conversation. Afterward, her parents returned home, feeling proud of the young woman their daughter was becoming. That evening, at exactly 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent her father a text message. She had finished her shift and was leaving the cafe. But just 3 minutes later, something strange happened. Her father received a call from Lisa's phone. When he answered, no one spoke. He could hear vague voices in the background, distant and indistinct, and then the sound of a car door shutting. It was confusing. At first, he assumed Lisa had accidentally dialed him while chatting with colleagues. But something about the silence unsettled him. He called her name a few times, hoping for a response. But there was only silence on the other end. Eventually, he hung up, thinking she would be home soon. However, as the minutes ticked by and there was still no sign of Lisa, a growing sense of unease began to take hold. She was expected to arrive within half an hour, but time passed and she didn't show up. Concern quickly turned into worry. Her father, deeply anxious, tried calling her several more times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Lisa's phone appeared to be turned off, a troubling sign, especially for someone who was usually so reliable about staying in touch. After waiting a short while longer, her father decided to retrace her route. Perhaps she had encountered trouble on the road, maybe even a mechanical issue with the scooter. Driving slowly, his eyes scanned the roadside for any trace of her, but the familiar route home offered no clues. Eventually, he arrived back at the cafe, holding on to the hope that she was still there. And to his relief, Lisa's scooter was indeed parked in front of the building. But the relief was short-lived. The parking lot was otherwise empty, and the cafe had already closed for the day. Approaching the scooter, he noticed something alarming. The keys were still in the ignition, and Lisa's helmet was left hanging on the handlebars, both highly unusual for someone as careful and responsible as she was. Lisa would never have left her belongings like that unless she planned to return immediately. But she was nowhere to be seen. Lisa's mother, equally worried, called the cafe owner to see if she had any information. The owner was surprised and said she didn't know where Lisa could be. According to her, the cafe had closed just after 6 p.m., and none of the employees had mentioned anything out of the ordinary. Still, moved by the seriousness of the situation, the cafe owner got into her car and headed to the establishment immediately. On her way, she called several of her friends who lived nearby and asked them to join the search. Everyone who heard the story wanted to help. It was unimaginable that something could happen in their peaceful town, especially to someone like Lisa. When the cafe owner arrived, she joined Lisa's father and a few others to begin a thorough search of the building and the surrounding area. They looked inside the cafe, checked the back entrances, and scanned the nearby roads and bushes. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother and older sister drove to the nearest bus stop, hoping that Lisa might have decided for some unknown reason to take public transport home instead of using the scooter. They carefully checked the bus schedules and waited for the next arrival, watching closely as passengers disembarked. But Lisa wasn't there. So her relatives immediately contacted the police. By the time the evening rolled in and the sun dipped below the horizon, it was nearly 7 p.m. When the local police arrived on the scene and assessed the situation, they acted swiftly. The fact that Lisa's scooter was found in the cafe's parking lot, with the keys still inserted in the ignition and her helmet left behind, led them to consider more troubling scenarios. It wasn't just a case of a teenager coming home late. There were genuine concerns that something serious, perhaps even criminal, might have happened. One of the primary possibilities they began to explore was the alarming chance that Lisa may have been taken against her will. Cases of this nature are exceedingly rare in Sweden, particularly in quiet rural communities like the one where Lisa lived. The country is known for its safety and low crime rates, especially outside major urban centers. Because of this, the local authorities did not hesitate to act. Multiple police teams were deployed to canvass the area. Search dogs were brought in, trained to detect human scent and pick up trails even in challenging terrain. Meanwhile, officers knocked on the doors of every home and building near the cafe, hoping someone might have seen or heard something, anything, that could provide a lead. Word of Lisa's disappearance spread rapidly. Friends from her school, former classmates, and members of the community began to post about her on social media. Within hours, her name and photo were being shared across platforms in the hopes that someone might recognize her or have information. The digital campaign was heartfelt and urgent, and people from neighboring towns started offering assistance. It was clear that Lisa's disappearance had touched something deeper in the public. It wasn't just a local issue anymore. Despite the efforts of both the authorities and concerned citizens, the first night passed without any breakthroughs. Volunteers and police combed the surrounding woods, fields, and roads, but no new clues came to light. Her family waited anxiously for any news, clinging to hope through the long and sleepless night. By early Monday morning, the case had grown more serious. The police officially announced Lisa's disappearance to the public through national media channels. They asked anyone who may have seen Lisa that Sunday evening or noticed anything unusual near the cafe or on the roads leading to it to come forward. Tip lines were opened, and the search entered a new, more intense phase. Around that same time, a local worker who had arrived to start his shift at a barn just across from the cafe made an unexpected discovery. On the floor of the barn, he spotted a single black motorcycle glove. Something about it seemed out of place, and given the active search effort in the area, he immediately reported it to the police. What made this detail even more puzzling was that detectives had already searched that very barn the night before, but they hadn't found the glove then. When the glove was shown to Lisa's parents, they immediately recognized it as hers. This seemingly minor object suddenly became a key piece of evidence. Its presence strongly supported the theory that Lisa may have been taken. The discovery prompted the police to increase their manpower and redirect search efforts toward a wider area around the barn and cafe. As word of Lisa's disappearance spread nationwide, people responded with compassion and urgency. Volunteers began pouring into the area from all across Sweden. Entire families offered to help. Local businesses donated flashlights, bottled water, and food to support the search teams. A prominent Swedish volunteer organization, specializing in searches for missing persons, also stepped in to assist. It was becoming one of the largest coordinated search operations in the country's recent history. On Tuesday, new developments began to emerge, this time from the efforts of civilian volunteers. As they scoured the terrain along a secluded dirt road not far from the cafe, a number of Lisa's personal belongings were discovered. Among them were her phone case, a small printed receipt, a transit ticket, and the shattered glass of a phone screen. Each of these items was later confirmed by her parents to belong to Lisa. Following this trail, searchers continued further along the path and found even more items scattered along the way. Additional fragments of the phone, Lisa's official identification card, and a few more paper receipts. It appeared that these objects had been discarded along the road, potentially from a moving vehicle, as if someone was trying to dispose of evidence or remove identifying items while fleeing the area. This discovery turned the search site into a focal point of the investigation. With this new cluster of evidence, authorities became increasingly confident that Lisa had not simply wandered off. They were now nearly certain that she had been taken and possibly moved through that very route. As such, all available resources, both official and civilian, were concentrated in that area. The mood among the search teams became more urgent, but also more united. People were determined to bring Lisa home. At this point, media outlets across the country were covering the case extensively. Lisa's photo appeared on every major news broadcast. Hashtags calling for her safe return trended on social media. Her story resonated deeply across Sweden, particularly among parents and young people who saw themselves or their loved ones in Lisa's place. Volunteers continued to arrive in growing numbers, with some traveling hours by train and car just to assist in the search. Over 1,000 people ultimately participated in what became one of the largest public search missions in Swedish history. Amidst the growing stream of tips and reports, one particular witness came forward with a story that caught investigators' attention. A local woman who frequently went jogging through the area recounted an unusual encounter. She said that on the day before Lisa vanished, while she was out on her regular run, she noticed a man standing beside a vehicle on a quiet stretch of road. He flagged her down and spoke to her in English, asking for directions to a town she had never heard of. She tried to help him using Google Maps on her phone. However, the man then asked her to get into his vehicle and show him the route using his navigation system. Alarm bells immediately went off in her mind. She politely declined and resumed her run, but the interaction had left her unsettled. What struck her most in hindsight was the impression that she had seen that man before. She believed he was one of the workers who had recently been doing repairs on the very same barn located directly across from the cafe where Lisa worked. That was not the only lead. Lisa's colleagues at the cafe also came forward with important observations. One of the staff members recalled seeing two unfamiliar men loitering across the road from the cafe on the evening of Lisa's disappearance. They seemed to be watching the building, Though at the time, the witness didn't think much of it. It was only after learning about Lisa's vanishing that she realized the importance of what she saw and reported the sighting to the police. On Wednesday morning, as the search intensified further, Lisa's father and a few family friends returned to the dirt road where Lisa's scattered belongings had been found. Hoping to find even the smallest clue, they walked farther along the path, checking ditches, bushes, and roadside gravel. Their persistence was rewarded, though the discovery was deeply upsetting. There, among the grass and dirt, they found Lisa's driver's license and the keys to her home. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on this area, but no other items were found. That evening, as the sun sank and dusk took hold, one of the volunteers, a close friend of Lisa's father, was heading home after another long day of searching. On his way, he drove past the café and the old barn across from it, the same barn where Lisa's glove had been found days earlier. He noticed something odd. The police tape that had previously sealed off the entrance to the barn was no longer there. The area appeared open once again. Curiosity and concern stirred in him. Though exhausted, he decided to take one more look. He retrieved a flashlight from his car. It was already getting dark, and stepped cautiously into the barn. Dust particles floated in the beam of his light as he walked the uneven floor, scanning each corner and crevice. Minutes passed without incident until something on the ground reflected the beam of his flashlight. A faint sparkle, just barely visible among the dust and debris. As he moved closer, the object came into focus. A small, delicate earring. A second one lay just a short distance away, glinting faintly in the beam of his flashlight. Recognizing the potential significance of the find, the man immediately contacted the authorities. The police responded promptly, taking custody of the earrings and showing them to Lisa's parents. With quiet heartbreak, they confirmed what investigators had feared. The jewelry belonged to their daughter. This find reinforced suspicions that Lisa had been in the barn after leaving the café, and that the structure may have played a central role in the sequence of events that led to her disappearance. Following the discovery, police resealed the barn and launched a far more detailed investigation. According to the lead detective, the initial inspection of the site had been limited in scope. On the first day, their focus had been entirely on locating Lisa herself. Smaller details, like tiny personal items, might have been overlooked. This time, a full-scale forensic operation was initiated. Specialists combed through every inch of the building, and search dogs trained in detection were brought in again. What they uncovered added a new layer to the mystery. Behind one of the wooden wall panels, investigators discovered biological material. DNA was present. Though tests would be required for confirmation, the implications were significant. This barn was no longer just a place of interest. It had become a potential scene of criminal activity. As forensic samples were collected and sent for urgent testing, law enforcement extended the search area. On Friday, volunteers made their way to a large farm complex roughly 2 miles from the café. The site, consisting of several industrial-sized barns and sheds, was frequented by workers and often bustled with seasonal laborers. Upon arrival, the search party began inspecting the ground systematically. But before they could cover much ground, 2 unfamiliar men appeared. They seemed uneasy and approached the team cautiously. They spoke only in English and told the volunteers that the police had already searched the farm, implying that further efforts would be unnecessary. This raised some suspicion. The search coordinator, an experienced volunteer leader, found the men's tone oddly firm and their presence unexpected. He decided to press on with the inspection, choosing not to take their word at face value. The 2 men lingered for a while, walking around the property and watching the volunteers closely. After some time, they returned to their vehicle and left the area without further comment. Their brief visit and unusual behavior didn't go unnoticed, especially considering that they were complete strangers in a small rural area where unfamiliar faces stood out. Roughly an hour after the men departed, a breakthrough occurred. Behind one of the livestock sheds, buried under what appeared to be a hastily arranged pile of branches, volunteers discovered a group of personal items: a motorcycle helmet, a jacket, and a set of headphones. All of them were quickly identified as belonging to Lisa Holm. The police were notified immediately, and officers arrived on site within minutes. The area was sealed off, and forensic experts were summoned once again to examine the surroundings. This farm, like the barn, was now considered an important location in the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives began piecing together the growing body of clues and accounts. They recalled the earlier testimony from the jogger who had been approached by a man speaking English. Her description had matched the general profile of one of the men seen around the café and barn. That man had asked her to enter his car, a request she wisely declined. Her instinctive discomfort was now viewed as extremely relevant. Investigators also remembered a detail from earlier in the case. During the initial stages of the search, police had spoken to residents of homes near the café and barn. One house stood out. It was occupied by two brothers originally from Lithuania, along with the wife of one of them. All three individuals communicated only in English. In fact, they were the only people in the surrounding area who didn't speak Swedish. The detectives had already taken note of this unusual circumstance. But now, further connections began to emerge. The two brothers were employed at both the barn where Lisa's glove and earrings had been found, and at the farm where her helmet and jacket were just recovered. The dirt path where Lisa's belongings had been scattered also led directly toward their residence. These factors, combined with their location, work history, language, and proximity, made them highly relevant to the investigation. The detectives had no definitive evidence yet, but the circumstantial case against them was growing stronger. Given the circumstances, the authorities made the decision to bring all three individuals in for formal questioning. While investigators prepared for interviews, volunteers and forensic teams continued their work at the farm. One part of the property began drawing attention: a rusted trailer hidden behind a storage shed. The trailer was partially concealed by overgrown weeds and tall grass, giving it the appearance of long disuse. However, closer inspection revealed otherwise. Next to the trailer's door, the grass was flattened. It looked as if someone had recently been lying there or walking in and out. Some blades of grass were visibly caught under the trailer door itself, signs that the door had been opened and closed recently. This contradicted the assumption that the trailer had been abandoned. Inside, the scene was eerie. The trailer appeared to have once served as a makeshift changing room for workers. Rows of metal lockers lined the interior walls, coated in a fine layer of dust and cobwebs. But there was one strange detail. While almost all of the lockers were locked shut, one stood ajar. Investigators immediately focused their attention on this locker, fearing what they might find inside. They started opening every cabinet and eventually found Lisa in one of them. News of the discovery spread rapidly throughout Sweden, rippling through communities like a wave of sorrow and disbelief. The story had already gripped the nation, dominating front pages and headlines for days. But the confirmation of Lisa's fate sent a collective chill through the public consciousness. In a country where such cases were exceedingly rare, the loss of a young woman under such circumstances struck a deeply emotional chord. People were shocked, not only by the tragedy itself, but by the fact that it could unfold in their own peaceful rural communities. As journalists scrambled to report the update, a peculiar and unsettling detail began to surface online. A group of internet users noticed an obscure YouTube channel that had posted a video nearly 2 weeks earlier, before Lisa was reported missing. The video was simply titled 13, and it featured a cryptic countdown. But the most disturbing part was the channel's name. It had been changed to Lisa Holm. The combination of timing and name created a stir, quickly attracting media attention and fueling online speculation. For a brief moment, theories spread like wildfire. Was this a warning? Could someone have predicted what would happen? Was it a form of taunting? But it didn't take long for digital investigators and law enforcement to uncover the truth. The video had originally been uploaded with a different title and under another channel name. After Lisa's case gained nationwide attention, someone changed the account name and video title to gain attention, or perhaps to provoke fear or confusion. It was a deeply insensitive prank or an attempt to create a viral conspiracy. Authorities ultimately dismissed the video as unrelated but cautioned against the spread of such content, which only deepened public distress. While the public processed the devastating discovery, behind the scenes, the investigation was intensifying. Authorities were determined to identify and apprehend the person responsible, now with even greater urgency. At the time Lisa was found, police had already brought in 3 individuals for questioning, 2 brothers and the wife of one of them. They were foreign nationals, originally from Lithuania, and they had all been living in a house near the cafe and barn, both of which were critical locations in the case. The 3 individuals denied any involvement. Each claimed to have been home on the evening Lisa disappeared. According to their statements, the older brother, known as Narus, had been asleep in his room. His wife was reportedly in the kitchen preparing dinner, while the younger brother was using the computer. Narus later added that around 8 p.m., he had briefly left home to visit a nearby gas station, where he claimed to have purchased pizza and cigarettes. Investigators, however, remained skeptical. All 3 alibis depended entirely on one another, and no independent witness could confirm their whereabouts. Given the circumstances and their proximity to the locations involved in Lisa's disappearance, police had strong reasons to doubt their version of events. Nevertheless, DNA samples were collected from all 3. At that point, though, investigators still lacked any concrete evidence directly linking any of them to Lisa or the scene. That changed soon. Forensic experts were meticulously analyzing the barn across from the cafe, the same location where Lisa's glove and earrings had been discovered. Inside a small office room that overlooked the road and the cafe itself, specialists made a significant breakthrough. They located biological material, which was immediately collected and sent to a laboratory for DNA analysis. Within days, results confirmed a match. The DNA belonged to 35-year-old Narus, the older of the 2 brothers. This development dramatically shifted the course of the investigation. Moreover, in another section of the barn, investigators found additional traces of DNA, this time on a length of rope located beneath a pipe on the floor of an adjacent room. Laboratory analysis identified 2 distinct DNA profiles, one belonging to Lisa, the other once again to Narus. The discoveries didn't stop there. Lisa's jacket, recovered earlier during the search at the farm, was re-examined. Investigators identified more biological material embedded in the fabric. Once again, it matched Narus. And finally, a hair belonging to Lisa was also recovered from the floor of the barn room, an area Narus had direct access to through his work. This combination of findings marked a pivotal moment in the case. For the first time, there was irrefutable forensic evidence linking one suspect, Narus, to both Lisa and the location central to her disappearance. While he continued to deny any wrongdoing, the DNA findings painted a very different picture. Despite these revelations, there was nothing directly tying the younger brother or the wife to any part of the crime. With no physical evidence or independent witness testimony implicating them, authorities were compelled to release both. Almost immediately after their release, the couple left Sweden and returned to their home country. The trial preparations were extensive. Defense attorneys tried to argue that Narus's DNA might have been found at the barn and farm for innocent reasons. After all, he had worked there for some time, and some trace material could have remained from regular use. His legal team emphasized that his presence in those locations did not, by itself, prove wrongdoing. The challenge for the prosecution, then, was to prove that this DNA was not simply incidental, but that it indicated direct involvement in Lisa's disappearance during the critical time frame. Key to their case was the forensic evidence discovered not just in workspaces, but on Lisa's clothing and personal belongings, items she had on her the day she went missing. One of the most compelling pieces of additional evidence came from witness testimony. A member of the local community told police that they had seen a vehicle matching Narus's car traveling along the road between the cafe and the farm multiple times around the time Lisa went missing. This directly contradicted his claim of being asleep at home. As the investigation pressed forward, the entire nation remained riveted by the developments in the case. Lisa Holm's name continued to dominate headlines, and public interest in the outcome did not wane. The police, aware of how closely this case was being followed, redoubled their efforts. With this in mind, the investigation extended beyond Sweden's borders. A team of Swedish investigators traveled to Lithuania to re-interview Narus's wife and his younger brother, who had both returned to their home country shortly after being released. Now, months later, with new evidence and growing public pressure, detectives hoped for a different outcome. When they spoke to Narus's wife, her story remained the same. She insisted, once again, that her husband had stayed home between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. that evening, and that she had been preparing dinner while he rested. However, when investigators sat down with the younger brother, the conversation took a surprising and crucial turn. After a few moments of silence, he confessed. He told investigators that Narus had not, in fact, been home the entire evening. Instead, he admitted that his older brother had left the house and didn't return until around 7:30 p.m. When he came back, he looked disheveled, his clothing dirty and dusty. 4 months later, the trial began. It was one of the most closely watched court proceedings in Sweden in recent memory. Narus maintained his innocence. Over the course of a month, the court reviewed a vast array of evidence: DNA reports, digital records, behavioral analyses, and witness statements. The combination of physical evidence and inconsistent testimony eventually led the court to a unanimous conclusion. Narus was found guilty. The sentence was life imprisonment, to be served in a high-security correctional facility in Sweden. In early 2017, Narus submitted a formal request to be transferred to a prison in Lithuania. The reasons behind this request were not immediately clear, especially considering that prisons in Lithuania are widely known to have far less favorable conditions than those in Sweden. Nevertheless, Swedish authorities approved the request. The decision, in part, reflected economic considerations. Housing an inmate in Sweden comes at a significant daily cost to taxpayers. It wasn't until later that same year that Narus's true motive came to light. After his transfer, he appealed to a Lithuanian court for a sentence review. His legal team argued for a reduction, and surprisingly, the court initially granted it. His life sentence was shortened to 15 years. For a moment, it appeared that Narus might succeed in dramatically reducing the consequences of his conviction. But public outrage in Lithuania quickly followed. Appeals were filed, and within a matter of weeks, the Lithuanian court reversed its earlier ruling. The original life sentence was reinstated. Narus would now serve his full term, without the comfort and privileges he had once received in the Swedish prison system. 5 years passed quietly. Then, in August of 2022, an incident occurred that brought his name back into the headlines. During a routine transfer of inmates within the Lithuanian facility, an altercation broke out between prisoners. Though staff responded quickly and emergency services were called, the injuries he sustained proved to be severe. Narus passed away on the way to the hospital.